It's Prodeus, is the title of this game called Prodeus. Either way, I've been pronouncing it Prodeus. It doesn't matter, it's Prodeus.
To say that the classic FPS has made a bit of a comeback is a pretty drastic understatement. What once felt like a novel throwback with propositions of titles like Strafe, and going even further back with Rack, is now a full-blown, dedicated, retro genre. It's one which embraces 90s design tropes and iterates on them, in a direction more or less free from corporate design influence or the dreaded consoleization. Purely PC and built around speed, spatial awareness, and more flying colors than a Pollock piece, the lovingly monikered boomer shooter is shootier and boomier than ever. Whilst the feature list for making a solid 90s shooter has a lot of common reoccurring traits, one of the more intriguing facets in reinvigorating this style of game is how to make it look the part without it merely appearing old. You could nod towards Dusk's dedication to environmental and atmospheric horror in its quiet moments, or the yawning infinity of a medieval psychedelic warped architecture. You could also look towards Iron Fury's unique opportunity to simply further develop old technologies, or authentically creating a new age experience on original tech like Wrath Aeon of Ruin. Whichever came to mind, every single one of these games has a distinct flavor to them that sets them apart from what used to simply be a Doom clone. If there's one title that's really made waves with its presentation, however, it's been Prodeus. Revealing itself to the community at large, it brought the bounty of a girthy arsenal of heavy industrial weaponry. Add in a side dish of intense and vibrant lighting design, coupled with gleaming materials spiced with modern tech and pixelated filters, creating a truly unique meeting point in game art. For dessert, we have a veritably unique approach to rendering real-time models as billboarded sprites. Prodeus was looking set to be a full-course meal of bombastic goodness. Recently, they unleashed a playtest demo onto the world, which you can request access to via the Steam store page for the game. As you can probably piece together in that enormous detective's brain, I received access to this. Without further ado, it's time to take a stab at the Prodeus entree. I played through the demo on normal first to get a feel of things, but the footage you'll be seeing is from my very hard playthrough. There are 7 different difficulties, ranging from ultra easy to ultra hard. This is probably too many in my honest opinion, but you may have a different experience tweaking and seeing what fits for you. I gotta say though, between the 2 difficulties I tried out, I really didn't feel too much of a difference between them. Perhaps the attacks were hitting harder and the patterns a little more aggressive, but it definitely felt like my own damage output was more or less equal. I did find myself consistently on a lower amount of health, and health pickups more valuable as a result, so obviously something had changed that I wasn't too aware of. How you respond to this style of difficulty is going to be subjective. If you're the masochistic type, you're probably going to want to bump up to even harder difficulty settings than I did. This being said, I found very hard to be a balanced experience for a seasoned FPS player. Most of what I struggled with, and a cruel twist of fate's serrated saber, was actually a result of the game's presentation style. See, a great deal of care has been lovingly slathered over the game's feeling of impact, in which everything you do feels punchy and deliberate. Part of achieving this is creating a spectacle of lights, explosions, and, most notably, blood. Unfortunately, the volumes of these particular effects can be visually obfuscating, leading to a lot of uncertainty as to how much I was dealing with a given weapon at any time. There were instances where I'd land a clean headshot with a single shotgun, content to proceed past the crimson fountain erupting in front of me. Then I was only to find out that the eruption of blood still had a very large percentile of its body left, leading me to take a significant melee hit and retreat in sheer embarrassment. It also appears that despite the trick used to render enemies and objects in 2D billboards, that locational damage is still exceedingly necessary to the combat meta. Whilst not too hard to determine on the smaller infantry-type enemies, the larger foes I encountered became a little too messy under the filter to make out what I was actually shooting, and if I was landing those specific shots. A little frustratingly, enemies also share a majority of their color palette, and will blend in whilst in a group, often forcing me into using a crowd control weapon to thin out the mass before identifying primary threats. Whilst the combat shotgun and rocket launcher deal fair amounts of damage to isolated enemies, the best solution for crowd control is probably the lightning gun, staggering enemies in a chain similar to the Wunderwaffe from COD Zombies. Under that, we also have the akimbo rifles and the minigun. Both of these are rarer in overall available ammo for the slice of the campaign provided in the playtest build, which is a shame as their automatic rate of fire and sound design lend to them being satisfying to use. Thanks to there being only a small amount of content at this current point in time, it's a little hard to get to grips with how the weapon and damage meta is intended to balance out. It's currently unclear which weapons are the essentials, and which should be saved for the more intense encounters. You can start to see how this can be combined through the game's custom maps and community level browser. However, with there being only a small portion of Prime Example to lead the way, most design decisions will be a lot more freeform. They also won't have the innate understanding that comes with digesting the game as a whole. While a unique way to promote a game, it's one which may have benefited from just a few more levels, or perhaps just anything but one main level, an intro map, and a movement course. Giving us one level and a map editor is a bit like getting the icing around the cake and being asked to interpret what the sponge inside is going to taste like. That being said, it's a cake that's looking to taste pretty damn good if all of the ingredients fall into place.